Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the show where we take these overwhelmingly complex topics and try to distill the essential knowledge you really need. And today, we're jumping into the housing market of Seoul, South Korea.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating one. I mean, when you picture Seoul, you see that incredible modern skyline, all glass and steel.
It's so dramatic. It looks, globally familiar.
It does, but that's the puzzle we're trying to solve today, isn't it? Behind that ultra-modern facade, the actual process of finding a place to live is surprisingly rigid. It's
Yeah.
it's complex for anyone who hasn't done it before.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to turn this sprawling, often confusing landscape, with its unique financial systems and intense cultural pressures, into a guide that's actually manageable. We're aiming for clarity here.
And we should probably start where Seoul itself starts, vertically.
Okay, yes, let's unpack this right away, because this was the first real aha moment for me, this idea of streets in the sky. We're not just talking about individual tall buildings.
Yeah.
We're talking about massive self-contained apartment complexes that integrate the entire urban experience, but upwards.
That's the key. Think about a busy neighborhood street, right? It has grocery stores, dentists, little cafes.
Sure.
In Seoul, especially in these huge Apatu complexes, those are the towering apartments you see everywhere, all of those services are built right into the structure itself.
You can literally get groceries, see a doctor, grab a coffee, all without really leaving your building complex.
Exactly. It allows this incredibly dense urban life to just unfold vertically.
Which has to change the very definition of a neighborhood, doesn't it?
It completely shifts it. The neighborhood becomes internalized. It's walled off almost. And if you look at Seoul's architecture, it's defined by these huge clusters of identical towers, with names like Brownville or Weave.
Right.
These places aren't just residences. They're powerful symbols of economic growth and really of middle-class stability in South Korea.
And you can see that ambition in the construction. I mean, the number of cranes across the skyline is it shows a city in perpetual renewal.
And that design lets them do complex mixed-use things. A restaurant, some offices, a gym, and apartments, sometimes all under the same roof.
But this design is tied directly to social status, right? I mean, what we found is that owning an Apatu, one of these apartments, is seen as the ultimate social goal.
It really is. It signifies you've made it. You have financial stability, you have status.
So it's less of a personal choice and more of a social imperative.
Oh, absolutely. One geographer we looked at called these complexes a factory producing the middle class. It highlights that intense pressure, your stability, your social standing. It's all tied to the physical structure you own.
And if the Apatu is the peak, that leads us right to the extreme financial systems you need to get there. This is where the market gets really different and where newcomers just hit a wall.
They do. And we have to acknowledge, for foreigners, this whole process can feel like a genuine endurance test. You've got Korean-only forms, landlords who might be a bit wary.
The end of the paperwork.
So much paperwork. Passport, visa, proof of income, and sometimes you even need a local guarantor, which is a huge hurdle.
The whole system feels like it's built on these established trust networks that, as an outsider, you just don't have access to at first.
Exactly.
So we absolutely have to decode the three main rental systems. Let's start with the one that sounds, frankly, unbelievable, Jeonse.
Jeonse is the traditional system, though it's becoming less common. The tenant pays a single massive upfront deposit. We're talking 50%, maybe more, of the property's entire value.
50%. And in exchange for that, what, the rent is really low?
Zero. You pay zero monthly rent for the entire 2-year lease.
Wait, hold on. No monthly rent at all. How is that possibly viable for the landlord?
That's the clever part of the system. The landlord takes that huge lump sum and uses it. It's basically an interest-free loan or an investment vehicle for 2 years. They live off the returns.
And the tenant gets the full deposit back at the end.
Provided there's no damage, yes.
Wow. So the landlord gets a huge interest-free loan and the tenant avoids monthly payments. But that obviously requires a ton of saved-up cash, which explains why it's getting rarer.
Exactly. Which brings us to the most common option today, especially for foreigners and younger Koreans. Wolse.
And Wolse is the system that's more familiar to us in the West, right?
Correct. You have a smaller security deposit. I mean, still sizable, but not Jeonse level. And then you pay monthly rent.
Do we have a ballpark figure for that?
Well, the sources suggested a decent studio in Seoul on a Wolse contract might start around 730,000 won a month. That's roughly, what, $530 US.
And we have to stress that's just a rough 2025 estimate. It's a starting point.
Right.
A place in, say, Gangnam is going to be a whole different story,
Oh, absolutely. Location is everything. And then you have the third option, bandit Jeonse.
which means half Jeonse.
Precisely. It's a compromise. You pay a medium-sized deposit, more than Wolse, less than Jeonse, and in return, you pay a reduced monthly rent. It's a hybrid.
Okay, so no matter which system you use, protecting that deposit is absolutely critical. This is the one legal step everyone has to remember.
It's non-negotiable.
You must file a moving-in report and get a fixed date stamped on your contract as soon as you sign.
This is your legal insurance. You go to the local community center, you get that stamp, and it officially registers your claim to the deposit. It makes you a secured creditor.
So if the landlord defaults on a loan or something, without that stamp, you could lose everything, even after signing a contract and paying a fortune.
That's how essential it is. It's the foundation of your protection in the system.
And we can't forget the hidden costs. The monthly management fees, the Kwanribi.
Right. The building maintenance fees, they are not trivial. Sources suggest they can easily be KRW 150,000 to 200,000 a month, or even more.
So you have to factor that into your total monthly budget right from the start.
The devil is always in those details, especially the extra fees.
Okay, let's shift to the actual types of housing. We've talked about the status symbol, apatu. Now we need to discuss the architecture of ambition, the office style.
The office tell is such a unique concept. It bridges residential and commercial zoning. It's a modern, usually small, studio apartment that's legally designed for both living and working.
That sounds incredibly efficient, but I'm guessing it comes with a psychological cost and a higher price tag?
It does. They're modern and well located, but they often cost more. And for a newcomer, living and working in the same small space can lead to some pretty acute isolation. The lines just get completely blurred.
And if we look past the high-rises, the city's housing reveals some stark economic divides. You have villas on one hand,
Right, the older, smaller, low-rise buildings, they're more affordable, more of a community feel.
and then you have the other extreme, the gauchy ones.
The gauchy ones. They are the absolute opposite end, the smallest, most basic rooms you can imagine. Sometimes just a few square meters with a bed and a desk. Many have shared bathrooms, shared kitchens.
It just makes the economic disparity so vivid, doesn't it?
It really does. But the market is slowly starting to adapt. In response to these climbing rents and, the isolation of living alone, we're seeing a big rise in share houses and co-living spaces.
This is the important trend shift. These spaces are popping up as a really attractive alternative, especially for young professionals or expats who just can't or don't want to commit to that traditional system.
They directly address that need for affordability, community, and maybe most importantly, flexibility.
Let's focus on that flexibility because it's so crucial for anyone on a business trip or an extended assignment. The office still was the old standard, but it has those rigid contracts and huge deposits.
And this is where these purpose-built flexible options like service departments or co-living really shine. They're a kind of plug-and-play solution.
So how do they actually solve those problems of rigidity and cost?
Right.
Like, what are the key advantages of a place like, say, Mangrove, which we saw in the sources?
Okay, first, the flexibility. A traditional lease is 1, maybe 2 years. Co-living contracts can start from just 1 month.
That's a huge difference.
It is. Second is the initial cost. You bypass those massive traditional deposits, the 10, 50 million won deposits, and instead you have a much smaller standard security deposit.
And the lifestyle is just fundamentally different.
Totally. They're fully furnished, utilities are often included, and there are social areas, community managers, 204/7 security. It's all designed to combat that isolation you might feel in an office stall.
So for anyone looking at short-term options, we need to offer 2 strategic checks. First, always check the efficiency ratio.
Yes, this is so important. Because of how things are measured in Korea, what looks like a decent size on paper can be a lot smaller in actual usable space. You have to be wary of those numbers.
And second, go back to the budget. Always factor in the total monthly cost rent, plus those management fees, plus utilities, before you sign anything.
So now, moving into our final section, we have to revisit the deep cultural reasons why this market is so intense. We touched on it, but the significance of homeownership just can't be overstated.
It's not just about having a place to live. It's the #1 indicator of financial success. Real estate is seen as the safest, best investment.
And that puts immense pressure on the market. It makes renting feel like a less secure, even a less desirable choice, which explains why the system is built on such high deposits and long contracts. It's all about building wealth in this very defined way.
So for you, the listener, we need to give some defensive advice to avoid the common traps. First up, contracts. Be so careful with Korean only or vague contracts.
Don't sign anything you don't understand line by line. Seek help. The sources mentioned English-speaking agencies like Ziptaz or Dream Realty that specialize in helping foreigners.
And on deposits, be wary of any non-refundable clauses that aren't tied to clear, documented damage. And of course, scams exist. Verify an agent's credentials if a deal seems too good to be true.
It almost certainly is. And finally, let's give a few concrete neighborhood suggestions. For good access to business districts like Jongno or Gangnam, but with more of an authentic feel, places like Sinseol-dong and Dongdaemun are great options.
And for a slightly more relaxed vibe that's still accessible, Godiak is an area that's getting more popular. It's about finding that balance between your commute and the kind of place you want to come home to.
To kind of synthesize all this, I think Seoul's housing journey requires you to understand not just where to live, but how the city functions, vertically, socially, and financially. It's a market built on networks and a very specific set of cultural values.
It's a city defined by that vertical landscape, right?
Mhm.
It symbolizes this massive forward-looking ambition. But the challenge for its future will be balancing that status-driven architecture with the growing need for more adaptable, more inclusive housing options.
That tension between tradition and adaptation is really key.
So we'll leave you with this to think about. Given that high-rise apartment living in Seoul is so deeply linked to conformity and social aspiration, how might the continued rise of flexible, community-focused spaces like co-living, which really prioritize shared experience over individual status, how might that start to change Seoul's rigid definitions of success in the next decade? We'll see you next time for the next Deep Dive.